So now everything settled? Yes. Everything is stable. I think it's pretty good. Suffering from the mark. Right. So it will be a simple. Hello.
Okay, we start. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Can you hear me? Welcome everybody to the World Bank office in Beijing. This is the launch, the global launch actually, not only the China launch, but this time we're launching this report from Beijing. And this is the Global Economic Prospects, which is a flagship publication of the World Bank, which we do twice a year to survey global economic developments. We're very pleased to have today Justin Yifu Lin, who is the chief economist of the World Bank, and at his right, Hans Timmer, who is the director of the Development Prospects Group, which is the unit in the bank that produces this overview. My name is Ardo Hansen. I'm the chief economist of the World Bank for China. And so Justin will make a few introductory remarks. Hans will fill in, and then they will answer questions about the report. So over to you, Justin.
Thank you very much. Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the global launch of Global Economic Prospects 2012 Winter Edition. And as you know, the global economy is entering into a new phase of uncertainty and danger. And it's a privilege for us at the World Bank Group to be able to provide with you a timely assessment of the global outlooks. And Hans, the director of our prospect group, will give you the main findings of a report. And I'd like just to highlight a few key messages of this report. The first thing I'd like to say, the sovereign debt crisis in Eurozone has appeared to be contained. However, the risk of a global freezing up of capital markets, as well as a global crisis similar to what happened in September 2008, are real. The second thing I'd like to say is that because of the private sectors, their risk aversion increased. And also the governments need to consolidate their fiscal position, and the banking sectors, they need to deleverage. And as a result, in Euro areas, the possibility of a recession is very high. And the third thing I'd like to say, the larger emerging market economies like India, China, Brazil, because in the past year, they are the driver of the global growth. However, there are some concern about inflation and overheating in their country. They need to have some kind of policy-induced slowdown. And a recession in the Eurozone areas certainly will put a pressure on them and their slowdown may be larger than is necessary to cope with the inflation pressure. And with this kind of backdrops, our baseline forecast for 2012 are as follows. The global GDP is likely to grow at 2.5% in 2012 and increase a little bit to 3.1% in 2013. High-income countries are likely to grow at 1.4% in 2012 and increase a little bit to 2% in 2013. Eurozone countries are likely to have a contraction of 0.3% in 2012 and increase to 1.3% in 2013. And developing countries in 2012 are likely to grow at 5.4%. And I'd like to say this is the lowest since 2002, except for the year of 2009 for the developing countries. And in 2013, they may recover to 6% growth rate. For China, because China still have a large room for counter-cyclical intervention, and so our forecast for China in 2012, the growth rate will be 8.4%, and 2013 will be 8.3%. And all these forecasts are lower than what we forecasted in June 2012, 6 months ago. And these numbers I just cite are the baseline forecast. Assume that the Euro area country they can model through. But if conditions in 3 or 4 the Eurozone countries deteriorate and also the capital market frees up, then the global output may be reduced 4% more than our baseline forecast. And if that scenario happens, no country can be spared. And if such downside risk occur, because no matter it's in the developed country or developing country, their fiscal space is much smaller than the situation in 2008. So if the downside risk occur, the downturn is likely to be longer and deeper than the last one. And with this kind of global outlook for us, concern about the developing countries, we would like to offer 5 advices to them. The first one, they should review their fiscal space and identify new sources of their fiscal income and area that they can improve the efficiency. And if they anticipate the budget deficit, then they should find a way to pre-finance them. Use the spare time, the time they still have now. And the second one, they should identify new drivers of growth, because if there are some kind of downside scenario, the government need to engage in fiscal stimulus. Then they better use those money to invest in areas which in the short run can boost demand, boost jobs, but can also link to the long-term growth. The third one is that they should carry out stress tests of their domestic banking sectors, because in the past few years there are some bubble or some asset issue in their domestic economy, and to avoid the homegrown financial crisis, it's better for them to do some kind of test, and if there's some necessary, they should start to find a way to recapitalize their banking sectors. And the fourth advice is that they should enhance their social safety net in order to be able to have a much better targeting in case that a crisis occurs. And the last one, crisis or external pressure can be an occasion for push forward the domestic reform. So they can also make some preparation for that. So with this, I'd like to invite my colleagues, Hans Timmer, to brief you about our main findings.
Thank you very much, Justin. And it's always a pleasure to be here in Beijing, and especially to do the global launch here, especially together with Justin. Justin already explained that 2012, or for you soon the year of the dragon, will be a very difficult year for the global economy. And let me give you some details in how the report explains why this will be a very difficult year. There are basically three broad categories of reasons. The first reason is that since August last year, we have seen contagion in financial markets going to all countries in the rest of the world, going to all developing countries. We saw, for example, that in the second half of the year, gross capital flows to the developing countries were 45% lower than they were in the period before. We saw that the spreads on sovereign debt in the developing world was on average 120 basis points higher in December than it was in July before August of last year. And we saw that everywhere in the world, stock markets declined sharply, often by 20% or more. And in total, the world lost since July some 9.5% of global GDP in the value of the stock markets. Now, that contagion was really new in August. Before August, for 1.5 years, we had seen problems in the euro area, but there was no impact on the rest of the world. There was no impact on developing countries, and that suddenly changed. So that is one broad reason why we are concerned. The second reason is, and Justin mentioned that already, is that last year some of the main emerging economies started to slow. In some cases even started to slow rapidly. And that is not just because of what happened in Europe and the contagion, it is to a large extent also the result of the policies in those economies to slow down their domestic economy for very good reasons. But we end up now in a situation where, for example, in Brazil, in India and Turkey, in December, industrial production was lower than industrial production a year ago. And we see that in the forecast reflected in low forecasts for Brazil and for India. For next year, also a sharp slowdown in Turkey. And even in China, you can argue that this all happened also, although not to the same extent. Despite the fact that you still have very solid growth here, it is a slowdown from an earlier period. And also you have seen some of the financial contagion that we see in the rest of the world, the slowdown of the stock market, the increase in the spreads of sovereign debt, and the reduction of the capital flows. So that is the second broad reason. The third broad reason is, and Justin mentioned that also, is that the world doesn't have the kind of policy space to react to another negative shock to the world economy. It's very clear in the high-income countries, where the fiscal position is increasingly part of the problem instead of part of the solution, where there is very limited space for additional monetary easing, but increasingly it is true also for developing countries. To give you one example, now almost half of all developing countries, I think the right number is 43%, has a government deficit of more than 4% of GDP. That is an area where it's difficult to sharply increase your government deficit to stimulate the economy. In 2007, before the great financial crisis, that was only 18% of the developing countries. So a sharp deterioration there. Also other examples of the debt, you can see that deterioration. So we are very concerned. As a result of that, we say we are living now what was half a year ago a downside scenario.